He was, I think, very aware of his mission, of his nothingness also, his poverty, because he always was trusting in God.
Every poor person, unwanted person, humiliated person, if you were not accepted by society, you were welcomed into one of his humble kingdoms.
He is really a champion of the poor.
He's a role model for the priest.
Totally.
I mean, if you read Starved and the Silent, his first book, I mean, this man is the ultimate priest.
He had a heart which was just brimming over with charity. And he had this deep, deep desire to bring people to Christ. And he had the vision and the capacity to carry that out.
From miracle workers to martyrs, to those ordinary people living extraordinary lives of heroic virtue, these are the people that make us wonder if someday they might be saints. Aloysius Schwartz was born on September 18, 1930 in Washington, D.C. to Luis, a furniture salesman, and Sedelia Schwartz. He was the third of 8 children.
Perhaps he would later be inspired to be a missionary from reading Boy Commandos, a common book series about young heroes who went around the world helping the poor.
His uncle owned a candy shop, and he would send like dozens of comics to the Schwartz house in Washington. And Father Al just threw out all the Incredible Hulks and the Supermans. He went to the Boy Commandos. And the Boy Commandos were orphans. There were 4 orphans from around the country, and they would go into Hitlerville and Naziville, and they would attack the bad guys. And Father Al would fall asleep at night, Lou, his brother said, to the Boy Commandos. And Lou said he saw the nobility and heroism in these 4 orphans that were superheroes for humankind. He said, I wonder if a priest can be that way.
Al grew up in tremendous poverty as his father struggled to earn a living in the middle of the Great Depression.
As an 8 and a 9-year-old kid, he went to bed at night hungry. He went to bed at night not knowing what the next day would be like. But he also understood when he prayed that God heard him. So it was in that poverty that Father Al's heart grew and his faith grew, and actually his desire to become a priest grew.
When he was 16, his mother died from cancer, which increased his devotion to the Virgin Mary, who he took as his spiritual mother.
Al always said he wanted to be a priest when he grew up, so he turned down a scholarship to the local Jesuit high school and instead joined his brother Lou at the minor seminary.
From the earliest age, even as a 13-year-old, when he entered St. Charles Minor Seminary, he was a seminarian who understood that if he was going to be effective or holy as a priest, he needed to subtract from himself. He needed sort of this element of self-renunciation.
With his eyes on the missions, he joined the Maryknoll Fathers and earned his bachelor's degree from Maryknoll College. He enjoyed his years at Maryknoll, but sometimes he found life at the seminary too comfortable for men preparing to serve as priests in poverty-stricken parts of the world.
He wanted something more austere, something more demanding.
During his novitiate year, he also noticed that some of the men were being sent for higher studies and realized he could end up a teacher rather than a foreign missionary. He decided to apply to the Society of the Auxiliaries of the Missions, based in Belgium. It trained seminarians to be secular priests incarnated into poor mission dioceses around the world.
Everyone told him, including his family members, there wasn't a single person that supported his move to Belgium to join the Samists.
His determination to follow the path that the Lord had placed before him is really inspiring to me. His docility to the Lord, his love for Our Lady, his desire, his craving for poverty in his life, both spiritual poverty as well as material poverty.
He was accepted and left for the Catholic University in Louvain, Belgium, just before Christmas, 1952.
He was 4 months behind in the course load in 1952, and almost within no time, he not only learned French and Latin, but he began to pass these European seminarians by.
He studied theology at Louvain Catholic University in Belgium, and while he was there, he developed a devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary under the title The Virgin of the Poor, a Vatican-recognized Marian apparition from 1932.
In Belgium, when he was in seminary, he said, "Mary, what do you want me to do?" And the Virgin of the Poor said, he heard, "Feed my poor, help my poor."
If he had found the Marianal Seminary too cozy to prepare him for life among the poor, the mediocre food, old buildings, and damp climate of the Belgian seminary gave him a better introduction to harder living conditions. So did his vacations in Europe. Not being able to afford the trip back between courses, he would hitchhike around Europe, staying and working at monasteries, or join Abbé Pierre among the poor rag pickers of Paris.
Father Al was ordained a diocesan priest on June 29, 1957, and began to serve under the Bishop of Busan in South Korea. He severed ties with the SAM.
In Seoul, Father Al got his first impression of the poverty that had still gripped the country 4 years after the Korean War had ended. The thousands upon thousands who had lost their homes or fled south now lived in slums on the edge of the city, many of them orphans. At Father Al's final destination, Busan, 250 miles south of Seoul, the situation was much the same as in the capital.
He was a runner, and he used to run up to 7 to 9 miles a day, sometimes longer. And what he did, he would use these runs as sort of revelatory gallops where he could see the poverty beneath Busan Bridge or in the shacks on the mountainside. And he would absorb these places, and he'd say, this part of the town needs help. This part of the town is where the lepers hide. This is where the unwed mothers are in a shack. He saw the orphans that were uncared for, parents who had died in the Korean War, and I think that's where he said, if I'm going to start, I'm going to start with the unloved child.
He was a driven man. He was a sort of a prophetic voice, a little bit like maybe John the Baptist, and he had this ability to have a vision and to see it through all the way.
Father Al, too, was suffering from the food and the cold winter, though he never complained. He had a grueling schedule between the hours he needed to dedicate to learning the language and the demands for his ministry. 2 months into his missionary life, he collapsed during Mass. The diagnosis was hepatitis A, with intestinal complications. He sought treatment at various clinics in Korea and kept to a strict diet. But after more than a year of dragging along on one cylinder, as he put it, he realized the only way to fully recover was to return to the United States. He took back with him extensive photos of the poverty he had witnessed. He was severely disappointed to find himself back in the United States, but he used his convalescence to do fundraising for Busan, speaking at parishes around the country and displaying his photographs.
He was very ingenious. He showed pictures, he told stories, and money started to come in. And then it became so effective that his own bishop from Korea, Bishop Choi, traveled and said, "Hey, can I join the show? I'd like to help you raise money." And within no time, really tens of thousands of dollars were pouring in.
He also met Gratian Meyer, who helped him form a nonprofit, Korean Relief Incorporated, and started direct mail fundraising, which would be the financial backbone of his work.
He started something that he called Operation Hanky, which was employing literally thousands of Korean women stitching little handkerchiefs that would be sent along with the direct mail flyers. And what he found is that the results were something like a 7% return rate to like a 30% return rate, like 4 times higher. And so he realized that these little well-stitched handkerchiefs kind of captured the imagination of many Americans. And he also realized that it kind of helped them realize their responsibility to the poor.
Father Schwartz, and this amazing program of how he was taking in these Korean refugee orphans from the Korean War results and transforming them into disciples of Christ, okay? Giving them a great education vocationally and academically with these sisters.
The manager of the office, a man by the name of Bill Vita, called and said, Father Al is coming to town and he would like to meet you. And we said, fantastic, we'll take him to the club for dinner. He said, oh, no. Father Al doesn't want to have anything to do with fancy dinners. He wants to have dinner at your kitchen table with your children. Finally, the doorbell rang and we went to the door with great apprehension and we opened the door and Father Al said, hi, I'm Father Al. And we said, Father, please come in. And the evening was off and running, and it was absolutely fantastic. And we did sit at the kitchen table, and dinner lasted quite a while. And the children never asked to be excused from the table.
When we went to close the door, okay, we looked at each other, and we simultaneously said, we have just met a saint.
It's the gospel truth. We saw the most unbelievable things happening. They just kept coming and coming. And I would say, Father, what are you doing with all these children? He said, we make room. If we have 2 bunk beds, then we put in 3. And there's always room for more children. And the sisters took care of the children. And Father, they loved them. They took care of them. It was the beginning to us of seeing the miracle of Father Al in action.
In 1961, he returned to Korea and took over St. Joseph's Parish in Songdo, one of the poorest areas of the diocese. Leaving the rectory to the 3 Benedictine sisters who had come to help him with the parish, he built himself a shack. For 4.5 years, he lived just like his poorest parishioners, a time he considered to be very blessed.
He needed that experience, that direct first-hand experience of the poverty that his people were experiencing, so that he could minister to them better as a priest. And I think there's a great lesson for that in us. We're not all serving communities that are as destitute as the ones that he's serving. But all of us priests have a responsibility to kind of know firsthand what our people are experiencing. And I think he got that almost intuitively. And so he needed that period of time where he could really live that kind of objective poverty of his own people.
As time goes on, he's starting to open up these leprosariums, tubercular wards, hospices, orphanages, and he realized more and more people were coming, and the state wards that were so poorly run, awful things were happening in there, and he wanted them. So he would contact city officials and said, I would like to purchase, essentially as ransom, these adults, these children who are dying in a certain way, their souls are dying. So he knew he needed to build. And within no time, the sisters are like this bright hallelujah out into the streets of Busan, Korea, where they identified cheerful, happy, postulants, aspirants, sisters, and said, boy, they actually love me. And then the order just grew.
Well, when they knew that there is our school, they take courage to come, and they study with us. They learn many things, and they have friends with the same situation, but they can see that their elder brothers and sisters in the school are changing their lives, and they are encouraged to follow.
These sisters would come in and be the spiritual mothers and in a sense the physical mothers of these children, especially, who would come in taking care of their physical human needs, the food and the water and the shelter, and giving them love and medical care and all the rest. And then he would be the one who would help the sisters, of course, but then he would also tend to their spiritual needs and to their souls, which were as hungry and just as starved as their bodies. And so I think he saw the relationship with the Sisters of Mary.
He also put an advertisement in the Catholic Weekly to recruit women willing to dedicate their lives to the service of the poor. He organized the Legion of Married Ladies to assist him in helping the poor. He founded the Religious Congregation of the Sisters of Mary on August 15, 1964, in Annam-dong, and on May 10, 1981, the Brothers of Christ. In 1964, he opened the first of several orphanages and schools, the Boys' Towns and Girls' Towns, as Father Al named them.
There are some natural qualities that make a great missionary, and these Father Al had in abundance. You have to have courage, you have to have the capacity to suffer and to endure a lot. You have to have a lot of administrative ability. You know, a lot of times saints come along who have the first two of those, but they really can't organize the thing, and he had a tremendous capacity for organization.
Over the next 2 decades, Father Al also built or was asked to run clinics, hospitals, and a center for disabled men. He expanded to Seoul, the Philippines, and Mexico.
3 years before he died, actually, he interviewed me when I entered in the Sisters of Mary to become a religious sister. Father Al was a simple man, but he is very active, always think and plan for the welfare of his children. He is really a very good father, and he wanted that his children will be trained and to become a good citizen in the world and a future saint.
By the time he was 34 years old, can you imagine this? He had built a hospital. He had about 5 to 6 hospices all over the southern peninsula of Korea. He was in the process of building a boys' town. He had no degree in business. He had no acumen in that regard, but he had given his life over to Mary.
Father is very courageous to expand his program to help the poor in different countries. His burning desire was there to help the poor.
He is a person who always tries his best. I think that is the one thing that God likes about him.
Father Al was diagnosed with a terminal illness, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS.
Lou Gehrig's disease, in a very real sense, was something that he asked for. He asked for it in Belgium, back when he was a seminarian. He said, I want to feel the crucifixion that you felt on the cross. I want you to give that to me, Christ. Father Al had a very deep desire to be Jesus, the starved man from the cross.
He realized that he was being invited into a deeper sharing of the suffering of Christ. And he bore that suffering with tremendous heroism. And he continued to be joyful, he continued to love, he continued to follow the Lord to the very, very end, to the very last day on earth.
But despite his deteriorating health, he still founded Boys Town and Girls Town in Mexico, which he called his unfinished symphony.
Setting up Boys Town and Girls Town in Mexico is incomprehensible. No one thought it wise. The sisters didn't think it wise initially. Very few people did, because he had Lou Gehrig's disease. Who's going to build a kingdom for the poor with Lou Gehrig's disease? But over and over and over again, Mary. But at this point, it wasn't Mary from Beno, Belgium. It was Our Lady of Guadalupe. It's sort of a transition. Father heard Mary's call from Mexico, and he said, I'm suffering. I use a cane. I have trouble speaking. I'm weak, but Mary, you call me. So he left the Philippines and he went to Mexico and said, let's make this happen.
He said, maybe I can start and sisters can continue. And finally, many prayers, and he was asking also advice of many people. He decided to come to Mexico in 1990.
The first time I saw him, he arrived at the airport. He was already on wheelchair. I did not see him healthy and strong. No, he arrived in wheelchair, and one sister was bringing him. And I saw looks very humble, very weak. And I was thinking, how can he do this work, no?
And he moved forward, and he was there for the opening in 1991 in October. And he was there, pushing the construction to go faster and faster and harder.
He gave us meditations and sermons and guidance, very clear guidance. Through that, we can practice that with the children and with our work. Especially now, we really try to serve with joy. All the time, he was smiling. We cannot see that he is suffering, but for us, he is just really conquering himself and giving a moment of joy, a moment of charity to the sisters. He told us that the main source of this work is the Eucharist, the prayer. And he said, if you remove the Eucharist from this work, it will collapse.
His illness made him immobile, and he continued his work in a wheelchair. He persisted in praying, hearing confessions, and preaching.
On March 16, 1992, Father Al Schwartz died at Girls Town in Manila. He was buried at Boys Town in Silang, Cavite in the Philippines.
The Sisters of Mary and the Brothers of Christ continue to serve tens of thousands of the poorest of the poor in Korea, Philippines, Mexico, Guatemala, Brazil, Honduras, and Tanzania.
He finished the race, and the sisters were greatly encouraged by how beautiful his death was.
The greatness of his love and his capacity to love was just phenomenal. To bring so many people into his heart and his desire to share their lives with them, to share the poverty of their lives, and to bring relief to that poverty.
Every day we can see among our benefactors, among the children, among the sisters, we can feel his protection, and even physical protection also we can see.
And we could really feel the presence of Father Al because we continue to expand his work, because he's always with us and helping us.
He himself wanted to become a saint and encouraged sisters and children to follow this way, no, that God is asking for us. That's why I think he's an exemplar priest.
On December 10th, 2003, the causes for beatification and canonization for Father Aloysius Schwartz were opened.
We have the fame of sanctity during his life, fame of sanctity during his death, and fame of sanctity after death. And because of that, we open the cause of Father Al.
In October of 2012, the Positio, an academic position paper on the life of heroic virtue and the fame of sanctity of Father Al Schwartz, was submitted to the Congregation for the Causes of Saints.
Life, virtues, and fame of sanctity of the servant of God, as written in the Positio. Once confirmed, once approved, he is no longer servant of God, but he already has a title of venerable.
January 22nd, 2015, Pope Francis ordered that the decree of the heroic virtue of Venerable Aloysius Schwartz be promulgated.
We are very much overwhelmed with the news that Father Al will become a venerable, and we're very excited.
And children and sisters were really jumping. That day we went to chapel and pray, and we have a Thanksgiving Mass, and it was really rejoice for us, and also the consciousness that we have to do our best in order to be good witness of our founder.
He is venerable now. We are trying to collect more miracles, but we have 170,000 graduates from our work. So our graduates are now proclaiming, we are the miracle, Father Al.
On March 14th, 2015, a Eucharistic celebration was held at the Sisters of Mary Girls' Town in Silong, Philippines, in thanksgiving attended by the Sisters of Mary, Brothers of Christ, and almost 9,000 children of Father Al's boys' towns and girls' towns, graduates from Korea, the Philippines, Mexico, benefactors and friends from different countries.
Father Al was not a social worker. He wasn't just one who sort of founded programs that helped the poor, as important as that is. What makes him a saint is, first of all, his holiness of life, his love for the Lord, but also the fact that the Lord placed in his heart a charism which has built up the church. And this is what saints have done through the centuries.
So his fearlessness and his persistence and his perseverance is, I think, is worthy of sainthood.
I'm sure that he will, because we are to be judged by charity, no? And what he has done is all charity, all out of love he's doing for children whom he never knew, no? And the only focus is to save their soul for God.
The whole program has just been a miracle, and we saw it all through Father Al. Is he a saint? You bet he's a saint.
And now the search for miracles is on. They must find medical healing through his singular intercession of a serious illness not liable to go away on its own. It must be instantaneous, complete, and lasting, and there can be no medical treatment that relates to the cure.
As far as sickness is concerned. So, if this comes in, a doctor is called, and it would say, beyond scientific explanation. When that's done, we return again to the Positio, making the Positio of the alleged miracle.
We always pray the prayer for intercession of Father Al, and each one of us, and even all the children, we recited the prayer, and we asked the intercession of Father Al to prove His holiness by performing a miracle. And we're hoping that someday it will come through.
An incredible event occurred, some might even say miraculous, the healing of a child at Boys Town through the intercession of Father Al Schwartz.
At the Boys Town in Seoul, Korea, they still talk about a seemingly miraculous event from 1997 involving a boy named Tahil Bak. On February 27th, he went to the bathroom of the dormitory and tried to catch a dove just outside the window. He fell from the 5th floor, plummeting to the ground from a height of almost 60 feet. When the sisters found him, his wrists were broken, his intestines were damaged, and his skull fractured. He was transferred to the public hospital, and from then on, he was in intensive care for 15 days. In the meantime, the sisters and children prayed fervently to Father Al, including Sister Maria Goretti, who was his mother's sister. She prayed intensely to Father Al that he might save him. On the 15th day, the doctor told Sister Goretti to remove the oxygen, for there was no hope. She begged him to wait just 1 day more. She believed the boy would still recuperate. Against all odds, he regained consciousness, and with rehabilitation, returned to perfect health. His friends and his sisters began to call him the Miracle Child. When later asked about the accident, the boy Tahil Bak said that after he fell, a white man had appeared and caught him in the air and set him gently on the ground.
When a miracle is found, investigated, and approved by Rome as being without natural explanation, Father Al Schwartz will be declared blessed.
He brought into relief a charism in the church that is needed today more than ever, perhaps especially in wealthier countries, which is an acknowledgement of the poverty of Christ and the call for every Christian in his or her own way to live that poverty.
I cannot forget the word of Father Al. That's why I'm trying also to imitate him, because he promised that if you want me to become a saint, make yourself a saint.
I've read biographies on some of the greatest priest saints in the history of the church. What Father Al Schwartz did and who he was, I've never read before. What he did was incomprehensible. It was flabbergasting. He did not just save souls, he saved generations of souls.
This has been They Might Be Saints. I'm Michael O'Neill. Thanks for watching.